Good evening, everybody. I have a request to make, and I bet some of you can guess what the request is. Please silence your cell phones. We want everyone to enjoy the talk tonight and have the attention, eyes forward, all that good stuff. So I really appreciate it. My name is Carol Pranchke. I'm the office manager here, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to be here tonight, and it is my honor to introduce our speakers. Tonight we're going to hear our speaker talk about achieving compassion and connection in a world that is in great need of both. And I feel that this is a subject that is vitally important because it's through connection that we can create a world in which each and every one of us is able to thrive. Sound good? Our speaker is a native of Los Angeles. Perhaps all three of them are. And our guest speaker is a Jesuit priest, and he pastored at Dolores Mission Church in Los Angeles. And at the time, it was the poorest Catholic parish in the city of Los Angeles, and it was experiencing a very high concentration of gang activity. And he was witnessing the violence that was occurring and the impact that that had on the individuals in the community. And at some point he said, we're going to do something about this. And he gathered with members of the parish and members of the community at large, and they decided to take a radical approach based on acceptance and inclusion. They began to treat gang members as human beings. In 1988, he founded and is still the director of Homeboy Industries, which is the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the world, and is often a role model for other groups working in the same direction. His first book, Tattoos on the Heart, is a New York Times bestseller, and his latest book, The Whole Language, well, it's sure to find a place in our hearts, and I know it has in mine. So I was going to say that he's going to introduce his companions, but he's already said they're going to introduce themselves. So first, we're going to hear from Ashley and David, but please join me in welcoming both Ashley and David and Father Greg Boyle.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I really appreciate you guys having us here today. I'm not good with speech, so bear with me. My name's Ashley Pagan, and I'm a guy, not a girl. Grew up in Boyle Heights, California, East Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles. Ex-gang member. You know, at a young age, I never really talked about this. It took me a long time to kind of face reality and stuff, but I mean, you guys are gonna be the first to hear it. I had a lot of anger growing up. You know, I used to run around with my friends. Started ditching, started getting high, partying. Started getting institutionalized at the age of 11. And it's kind of hard. I never figured out really too much why I had that much anger in me, and until it finally hit me after all these decades. But kept getting incarcerated, gang banging, running around with my friends. A lot of my friends that I grew up with are, dead or doing life in prison right now. So, I thank God that I'm one of the guys that made it out and I'm still here, So, I wouldn't want to go home because I was always high. When people ask me, like, well, what's making you so angry? And, what is it why you carry this anger inside you? And I used to be like, I don't know, like, I just had all this anger. I used to be like, my parents, I got good parents, So, kept getting incarcerated. I went from juvenile to juvenile. I went from a placement home to juvenile hall to placement to camp. I ended up in CYA, which is California Youth Authority. I ended up in prison, sad to say, but I've been probably prison you could think of. And I've been out a few years now. I just got out the federal system. It took me all these years to figure out where a lot of that anger came from. And like I said, I didn't figure it out till I came to Homeboy Industries. My friends used to always tell me, go to Homeboys, you'll learn this and that. And I was like, oh, man, I ain't going to Homeboys. I wasn't ready. Like, I ain't going. What am I going to go there for? My thing was, why am I going to work side to side with people that either try to shoot at me or try to shoot at them? Like, I just didn't trust it. So I stood away from it. And, as the years went by, my kids were getting bigger. I got 2 daughters, which I love very much. I kept telling myself, I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I told myself, you're going to keep doing this? You're in your 40s already, bro. You're not a little kid no more. The only ones that are suffering are your kids, your wife, and your family. So I said, all right, I'll get out. I'll give it a chance. So I got out a little over 2.5 years ago, probably almost 3, and I said, all right, I'm going to go to Homeboy Industries. So I came to check it out. I didn't know what to expect. I had friends that had been there for years, but I was like, what am I going to do here? I was still lost. Like I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. So as I got there, they have programs. They have, they welcomed me with open arms, Like, I had my parents, and I knew they loved me, but at the time I wasn't really paying attention to it. But when I stepped foot into Homeboy Industries, you can feel. If any of you are ever down there, make sure you go there. You feel the love, the kingship, the loyalty. There's always somebody there that's gonna help you. No matter what it is. We got programs for anything you could think of. And when I got there, people helped me. People that I didn't know walked up to me and you need help and this and that. And I was kind of cautious, I didn't want to accept that help because of the pride and everything. But that place showed me how to break down the walls and barriers that I had in my life. That place showed me how to, know that the person next to me is just the same kind of person as I am. Not all the grudges and hating people because of our gangs and everything that we didn't get along with or whatever. It was, at the time, we grew up with rules that we grew up with that we thought, okay, this is what it means. This is what we're gonna apply by. This is what it means. But as you get older, you realize that those are just, rules that you think that apply to you, but didn't apply to you. And that place it's humbled me. It's turned me into a different person. It's taught me to want to help people, love people, help them in any which way I can. And Father Greg and Homeboy Industries and my brother David, there's a lot of people like us over there, a lot of changed men. A lot of us that thought we couldn't do it. A lot of us that thought that we weren't gonna make it in life. We're making it in life now, and I thank God for that, and I thank Homeboy Industries and Father Greg Boyle. I do security there now. I work at a LAC Medical Center now. I work with the mentally ill transition homes, and I loved all this stuff that I never thought that I would do. I love to do, and it feels good to help other people. And getting back to my young age, my father left when I was a kid. I have my father now, my stepfather, which I call my real father. But at the time, I think, it took me all these years to realize that I just had all this anger inside. I didn't want no other man to replace that love that you should have for your children, And so I used to take it out on my dad and use that with my mom. How can you do this to me just to leave to the streets and get involved in drug addiction, selling drugs, committing crimes, things that I regret doing. that I know I'm gonna have to live with the rest of my life, but I know that I'm changing my life now, and I know that I can make a difference, and whatever I can do to try to get that back and help other people, that's what I'm gonna continue to do. So, it took me years. I think it was just all that anger bottled inside, saying, like, you ain't my dad, and throwing it in his face. And I don't know, that just led to one thing, and one thing led to another. And it's sad, because I spent a lot of years away from my family, and always blaming them when it was really me that needed to open my eyes and see reality in life for what it is. And I just thank God now that I had the opportunity, and I have the opportunity to make things right. And just so you know, my so-called stepdad that I didn't get along with, is still my father, and he's been here for the last 46 years. And I'm just so grateful to getting the chance to actually have the courage to walk into Homeboys, and it changed my life. I don't care all negativity, anything that everybody brings towards me. I just push it away, because I know I'm in a good place, and I know that I'm being helped, and I know that I work with people that love me, people that are gonna be there for me, and I wanna do the same for everybody else for the coming years and more. And thank you guys very much.
Hello, I'm David. Thank you for having me here. My story is a lot similar as Ashley's. I started off in Aliso Village as a child, running the streets from a dysfunctional. Well, we're not allowed to call it dysfunctional now. They changed it into unbalanced. I come from an unbalanced family. So, so now I come from an unbalanced family that many things came from it: trauma, abuse. It was verbally, physically. It was slander. It was things these things that kept us, where we were at. But I understood it, and my parents tried their hardest. I'm not gonna say they didn't, but I stayed away from that. I went to the streets, and I went into the projects where Father Greg started everything, Aliso Village and Pico Aliso, and like the lady said, there's nothing but gangs there, and so I started off as a little stoner with long hair, so you could picture me with long hair. And then all of a sudden it turned into gangs, because we had a group of friends that wanted to be a gang, and we started a gang, and we had rivals, we had territory, we were territorial, we wanted a piece of it, So with all that comes violence and everything else that comes with it, drugs, addiction, peer influence, and so forth and so forth. So I ended up in the Youth Authority at 13 years old with 25 to life, and I didn't get out till I was 25. So I felt comfortable because I was already around gang members, and I already knew that life. So unfortunately, I stayed in the Youth Authority till I was 25 because I didn't get any better. I just got worse, And when I did get out, I tried to get my life together. And I met a young lady, a Russian young lady, and I gave it all I had, we got a house in West Covina, away from Los Angeles and my neighborhood, the projects. but I would still end up back and forth there because that's where I was comfortable at. And but I gave it all I had. I had a kid with her, and she had another boy and a girl that I was raising too, that I was fortunate enough to share my life with. And unfortunately, I got locked up again because somebody had killed my little sister through domestic violence. And I actually wasn't doing drugs or alcohol. I was living a normal life after the youth authority. But once that happened, I never felt pain. I never felt pain like that ever in my life. I had to put my little sister's face together to try to get an open casket. And there was no reconstructing it. There was no way I could put it together. And I don't know how to explain. I would never wish anything like that on anyone because she was my everything. She was the one that I used to go to for everything, talk to and be comfortable to talk about anything, secrets, whatever it was. And it impacted me. I didn't want to live no more. I didn't want to go on. I left my kid, the woman that I fell in love with. I ended up back in the crime scene and back in the projects, surviving, back in the gang life. And I eventually ended up back in the Justice Department, now in prison, facing 52 to life. By the grace of God, He saved me. I got 16, and I did all this for vengeance, you know. I got back at the guy's family or did something that I didn't want to do. And unfortunately, nobody lost their life, but it was a long lesson because vengeance are definitely not mine. And I wouldn't want to live like that either. I wouldn't wish such hateful things on people. So I was introduced to Homeboy Industries. I heard everything about Homeboy Industries because my little brother was in and out of Homeboys. He was working in a bakery. At one point in his life, he was with Father Greg, living on the side of one of his churches or something like that. But I happened to knock on his door in a taxi. And I told him this story today. He don't remember, but I say I literally took a taxi. And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I took a taxi." And he was like, so I knock on his door looking for my little brother, and he goes, no, he's over there. Okay, that's fine. But I heard about the program. I didn't take it serious. I wasn't ready, obviously, and so to go further, I didn't. I was still caught up in things I couldn't understand. I was in that web, and from program to program, giving them dirty tests. I'm obviously in recovery now. I want to become a drug and alcohol counselor and more. I'm in pathways to college. Thanks to Homeboy Industries, I was able to reflect on myself, take classes, and work on myself. And understand why I keep doing these things, and they welcomed me. They showed me love. They never gave up on me. They always opened the doors for me. And Father Greg was always loyal to me. There's not a time in my life that he wouldn't help me when I came to him. And I do remember one time I told him, I feel embarrassed to ask you. He said, "Never feel embarrassed. You could come with me with anything." And now I'm his biggest pain in the butt. So, with that said, I don't have much time, but so I'm really grateful that I'm able to share my story and be a part of Homeboy Industries and to have such a beautiful person in my life as Father Gregory Boyle, because I've never met anyone like him, and I love him with all my heart, you know, and he gave me a chance, and I think we all need a chance to prove everyone wrong, you know. There is change in us. There is there is hope for us. I didn't have hope, so I came around people that loved me and accepted me, didn't judge me, showed me that I was worthy of something, that I can do basically anything I can. I never thought I would be in college debating or you know, learning every right name for drugs, or you know, I know every street name, but now now I know the right names for them. And you know, I'm grateful that I'm able to educate myself through Homeboy Industries, Pathways to College, the classes they have, the job opportunities, the lessons I learned, and then we're all the same. And they led me back to God. And now I have a God in my life. I went to NA, AA. Now I contribute to the community, the homeless. I feed the homeless. Well, I kind of haven't been. I've been working kind of hard. But I have a couple jobs, but I do feed the homeless in downtown LA called Feed the Streets LA. I do contribute to that because I have been in that situation where I've been homeless and lost, you know, in my addiction, and running the streets hungry, and I know how to sympathize now. I know how to put myself in those shoes, and I know how to contribute now. I'm a giver. I'm not a taker no more, and I hope God has more use for me and everyone else, so we can make a difference in our life and make an impact in life. And I learned all that through Homeboy Industries, the people in my life, my family that has accepted me, and I could see it in their eyes, and it brings tears to my face because they wouldn't even open the doors before, you know. Everybody was scared to open the doors for me. And now they give me keys. And I go in and out as I please. But I do get questioned when I come a little late. And God forbid I do something that's not in the same order I did the day before, because actually I'm like, are you back on drugs? No, man, I went to a meeting and we fellowshipped. Okay. Okay, everybody's asleep. Go. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I can take direction. I can follow direction from my sister, and I'm proud of her. She's a nurse. She's a lovely person. She accepted me. And I'm grateful for Father Greg too, and Homeboy Industries to give me my life back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for somebody's glasses. Okay, yeah. So thank you for welcoming me, the three of us, and did you just turn that up higher? Oh, okay, good. So thank you. It's been a joy to travel with David and Ashley. And actually, Ashley's first plane trip was yesterday. So 47 years old on a plane, and he did very well. So I was tabulating, together they're 100 years old, and half of that 100 years, exactly 50 years, they were locked up. So that's a lot of time. We aren't made safer by that, we're made lesser by that. So it's a privilege to be with all of you, and really an honor to see my classmate of 50 years ago, Jeff Fuller. We graduated from Loyola High School in Los Angeles. And it's the privilege of my life for almost 40 years to have worked with gang members, and the day won't ever come when I have more courage, or I am more noble, or I'm closer to God than David and Ashley. I remember once there was a guy named Lewis who we went out to dinner, and he was had been a gang member, heroin addict in recovery, shot caller for his gang, had been to prison, tattooed, and he was kind of, at that time, he was kind of running Homeboy and a force of nature. And he also got up to speak, and he liked speaking. And we went out to dinner, and he was giving me tips on how to speak publicly. And he said, you know, G, you gotta pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. I said, yeah, no shit, that is some good advice. Speaking of which, I went for a little walk this afternoon, and I was on the 16th Street Mall, and some child of God came up to me and he says, "Good afternoon, Santa Claus." I went, so anyway, that's some self-defecation there. So you know, there's a vision that kind of brings you to this place this evening, and it's a vision of wanting the world to look differently. And so we're all rolling up our sleeves. We're all trying to figure out what to do. The prophet Habakkuk writes, "The vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it." So my sense of all of you already is that not one of you want to wait for too long con los brazos cruzados, you know, and tapping your feet and waiting for something to happen. You're here because you want to make something happen. Mother Teresa diagnosed, I think, the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle? How do we together go from this church this evening and decide to dismantle the barriers that exclude? And so to that end, we're all called in our way, in our own particularity, and certainly Circle of Love does that, you know, by going out to the margins, because it is the only way they'll get erased. And you stand there, and you plant your feet there, and you stand with what the founder of the Jesuits, St. Ignatius of Loyola, would call affectionate awe, acatamiento. And it comes from the word acatar, and it means to look at something with attention. Acatamiento, affectionate awe. And you stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than in judgment at how they carry it. And you stand at the margins with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you stand with those whose dignity has been denied, and you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And then you get this remarkable privilege to be able to occasionally stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. And you get to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. So all of us long for the day when policing is obsolete and our prisons are empty. It's okay to long for those days because that's what you work towards. We're trying to create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it, where there is no us and them, where we obliterate forever the illusion that we are separate. No kinship, no peace. No kinship, no justice. No kinship, no equality, no matter how singularly focused we may well be on these worthy goals. Unless there is some undergirding sense that we belong to each other, we can't really achieve those things. And that's what we try to do. So in 1988, Homeboy Industries was born in the projects, as was mentioned, where I was pastor for 6 years, from 86 to 92. And it was the poorest parish in the city. It was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. It had 8 gangs at war with each other, which was unheard of in public housing. Ashley came from a public housing development in Los Angeles, 1 gang. We had 8, and which was really odd. And so they were all at war with each other, and the LAPD deemed my parish to have the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city. And so I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988. And then I buried my 256th 2 weeks ago. Not all from that community, but were a part of a large gang reentry program. And so I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school because there were so many junior high, middle school age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school, and nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the middle of the day, writing on walls, selling drugs. They were violent. And so I walked out to them in the projects, and I would kind of isolate them one at a time, and I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, every single one said, yeah, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. And so across the street from our church is our elementary parochial school, grades K to 8. And they occupied the first 2 floors, but the entire 3rd floor was the convent. And so one evening I sat all the nuns down in their living room, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out? And we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And I remember they looked at each other and they went, sure. And that was the entirety of their discernment process. And so that brought gang members in large numbers to the school, which was really a rough and tumble place. We'd have teachers who would last mere weeks. Once I had a principal who lasted just 1 day. And I remember I called him the next day to kind of see where he was, and, new number, and he had checked into some witness protection program, and we had fights every day. It was just quite, now when I look back on it, it was so untenable, but it ended up working. But it created a disconnect because you had gang members coming to church property, and people in the parish would sidle up to me and say, gosh, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed? Good people in and bad people out, which was a good gospel challenge, I thought. And so and then in no time at all, gang members started to say, if only we had jobs. So myself and the women in the parish, and the projects were really mainly women with children. And so myself and the women, we marched around the factories trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. And so we started things, maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center on the property of the church. And then in 1992 was the unrest that followed the acquittal of the 4 police officers after Rodney King. So every pocket of poverty ignited, except the poorest pocket might perish. And so the LA Times wanted to know why that was, and so I said, well, I don't know. They asked me, and I said, well, maybe it's, in part because we have 60 strategically hired gang members who have a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before, and more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch their own community. So the article appeared in the LA Times the next day, and the following day I was invited to the Beverly Hills office of Ray Stark, who was a movie producer who happened to have $500 million. And he sat me down and he said, how should I spend my money? And as I look back on it, I can see now I woefully undershot my request. I had hair, I was younger. And I said, well, there's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. You could buy it. It has ovens. They don't work, but, you could fix them. I don't know. We could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They could bake bread. We could call the place Homeboy Bakery. That was the extent of my business plan. And he said sure, and so we were off and running. And a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we changed our name. We had called ourselves Jobs for a Future, and we changed it to Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this. Not everything worked. I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing really was not hugely successful, Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And now, we spoke at Regis Jesuit, and somebody said, well, how did you think of all this? And well, we didn't. We really evolved, backed our way into becoming now the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. But we never set out to do anything like that. So 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors wanting to reimagine their lives. Here's the truth about gang members is no hopeful kid has ever joined a gang in the history of the world. Ever. Period. There are no exceptions to that. Kids join gangs because they're despondent. They can't imagine a future for themselves. And if you can't imagine a future, then your present isn't compelling. And if your present isn't compelling, you won't care whether you inflict harm or duck to get out of harm's way. Or gang members are traumatized, abused, sexually, physically, emotionally, and they can't see their way clear to transform their pain, so they keep inflicting it. Or they're mentally ill. It's a continuum of severity, some more despondent than traumatized, some more traumatized than mentally ill. If we knew that, and if we named things correctly, what would we do? We'd infuse hope to folks for whom hope is foreign. We'd heal the traumatized. We'd deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way. That's what we would do. Homeboy was hard in the beginning. We were talking today about how the first 10 years were bomb threats, death threats, and hate mail. And never from gang members, because we always represented hope to the gang member. 120,000 gang members, 1,100 gangs in LA County. But we would get letters from law enforcement often. I'm a sheriff and I hate you, Good morning, have a nice day. And my voicemail would be packed with the most vile things, because the demonizing was so full. But that's changed, I'm happy to say. We haven't gotten any such mail in the last 20 years. And that says a lot about how we grow as a society. People used to be divided. Are you smart? Are you tough on crime? Or are you soft on crime? And then people embrace smart. And then it changed the whole territory. And Homeboy changed. Our motto was nothing stops a bullet like a job. And then about 15 years in, we said, no, it's about healing. Will the day ever come when we stop punishing wound and decide to heal it? And so we changed, and it has an 18-month training program and therapy and groups and anger management and classes and further education. And we have navigators and case managers and free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We have a designated clinic with 3 laser machines, 1 paid physician assistant, and I don't know how many 43 volunteer doctors. And it was all started because of a guy named Frank who wandered into my office, and I'd never met him. And he was 2 days out of Corcoran prison. And he sits in front of my desk, and tattooed on his forehead, filling the entire space, written in old English lettering, filling the entire forehead, and pardon my French, it said, "Fuck the world." And he said, I am having a hard time finding a job. I said, well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one. And so naturally, I hired him, and he worked in our bakery. And then I went to White Memorial Hospital, and I found a doctor who was a dermatologist, had a laser machine, and I coaxed him into giving us 1 hour a month. And he chipped away at Frank's forehead and a handful of others. And in a couple months, I had 3,000 gang members who wanted this same. And we couldn't really stay with that arrangement anymore. Parentheses, Frank is currently a security guard at a movie studio, and there is no trace left of the angriest, dumbest thing he had ever done, proving once and for all that all of us are a whole lot more than the worst things we've ever done. I want to get to question and answer, so I want to just tell one more story. And so the bakery, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. And it's hard to understand what the bakery represented in Los Angeles in 1988 and 99 and 92 when it was flourishing. And it was an exit ramp. It started to galvanize the imagination of gang members. Before, truly, there was no exit ramp off this crazy, violent freeway. They couldn't see it. They didn't know what it, you're screaming at us, just say no to gang violence, but how do we get off? And then Homeboy imagined that. So currently, Homeboy is the front porch of the house all of us want to live in, a place of connection and kindness. And if it's true that the traumatized are likely to cause trauma, it has to be equally true that the cherished will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing ourselves, themselves, and others. So Homeboy got a lot of attention in '92, and it was, news crews and busloads of Japanese tourists, and actually, frankly, on this day, Prince Charles's business advisors, now King Charles III. And it burned to the ground in October of '99. And was devastating. And it came right at the time when we were getting the most vile hate mail. And it was kind of the friend of our enemy is our enemy. And we discovered in short order that it was natural causes that brought the bakery down in a blaze. It was wiring inside the wall in the office. But I ran over there at 3 in the morning. I could see the flames shooting through the roof, and there were a group of señoras, who were just sobbing and hugging me and saying, don't worry, in the morning we'll have a venta de comida, we'll sell food. And there was a homegirl named Lucero who just wouldn't let go of me, and she was sobbing, and she says, don't worry, G, we'll have a car wash. Which I'm sure would just put us over the top there. And there was an old grizzled Irish-looking fire inspector. He came up to me, somebody must have pointed me out and said, are you the owner of this building? And I said, yeah, I guess. And do you have any reason to believe why somebody might have set this fire? And I could feel my nose growing, and I said, well, no. He said, well, you didn't have any disgruntled ex-employees, did you? I said, no, I think we're okay there, because all the disgruntled ones, still work for me. He didn't laugh, and then he leaned in, he was going to confide something. He says, this area where the bakery's located? I said, yeah, and he goes, it's known for gang members, I said, well, that's okay, because we only hire gang members here, and so the sun came up, and we were able to contact all our bakers, except for one, a kid named Danny Marcia. And we couldn't find him, so sure enough, he shows up for his, for duty. And his step is light as he gets off the bus. And he's wearing his white, perfectly ironed Homeboy Bakery uniform. Danny emblazoned over here, Homeboy Bakery over here. And he walks into the parking lot, and he sees the smoke still wafting through the roof, and he sees his coworkers, mainly enemies, picking through the rubble, and he realizes what this is, and he puts his face in his hands, and he just sobs, because indeed, this was more than a job. It was his reason to get up in the morning. And the union he experienced with his coworkers was deeper than anything he had ever known with his family, and certainly with his gang. So all we could do was surround him with love and the promise of rebuilding. And that's what we've done. But in those early days, it was news crews, and everybody came to visit this thing. And our foreman was a guy named Roman, and he was the biggest drug dealer I knew in the projects, and I knew all of them. And he always resisted my efforts of offering to have him work at Homeboy. And in recovery, it's the same of gang recovery. They always say it takes what it takes. And for gang members, it can be the death of a friend, the birth of a son, a long stretch in prison. It takes what it takes. Not sure what it took for Roman. Maybe it was his 4-year-old daughter, Clarissa. So finally he agreed to work at Homeboy Bakery. And then because he was a leader, I made him the foreman. And because he was the foreman, which is a great deal more difficult to supervise your enemies, even more than working with them. And so he was supposed to greet all these crews, and he just didn't like this at all. And one day we were waiting for a busload of Central California farmers. And I don't know why they came down, and they all owned farms, and they wanted to see the famous Homeboy Bakery. So he and I are waiting in front of the bakery for them to arrive, and he's having a bad attitude day. And the bus pulls in, and I'm saying, oh, go ahead, park over there. And it's a sleek, slick, ultra-modern bus, and it has the microphone at the front of the bus for the tour guide. And Roman sees the microphone, and he pretends he's the tour guide. Welcome to Homeboy Bakery. Observe gang members in their natural habitat. Please keep your hands in the bus at all times. Do not attempt to feed the homies. They are not yet tame. And I said, cállate, cabrón. And so they get off the bus, and Roman takes the tour. And so I go back to my office on First Street. Well, I come back later, and I said, hey, dog, how'd that tour go, by the way? Damn, gee, what's up with white people? And I said, I don't know. What's up with us, you know? And he said, well, they always be using the word great. I said, really, we do? He goes, yeah, check this out. This busload of gabachos, they come in here and they see the bakery and the ovens and everything is working and everything is clean. And they say, this place is great. And they see the homies, enemies working side by side. You fellas are great. And then they try the bread and they go, oh my gosh, this bread, it's great. He says, how come white people always be using the word great? I said, I have no idea. I'd never heard of this until, you mentioned it. And trust me, every opportunity I could find since then, I told him how great he was just to mess with him. And so cut to, 6 months later, I drive into the bakery as it's about to close, and he rushes to my car, which he was never excited about anything. I could barely get out of the car, and he goes, hey, gee, you're not going to believe what happened yesterday. So after his shift, he goes to the babysitter to pick up his 4-year-old daughter, Clarissa, and he puts her in his car, and he drives her home where he is a single father, to a home where he is paying rent with honestly earned, clean, decent money. And he unlocks the front door, and little Clarissa goes running down the hall, and she lands in the sala, in the living room, and she plants her feet, and she extends her arms, and she takes the whole room in with her gaze, and she says, this is great. And he said, I thought she was turning white on me. And he gets down at eye level and he says, Mija, what's great? And she clutches her chest. And with great emotion, she says, my home. And as soon as he says those two words, both our eyes immediately well up with tears, and we just stare at each other for what feels like an eternity. And we stare as the tears roll down our cheeks. And I break the silence and I say, you did this. You've never had a home in your life, and now you got one. You did this. You used to be the biggest drug dealer in town, and you baked bread instead. You did this. You've never had a father in your life, and now you are one. And I hate to have to tell you, but you're great. I haven't told that story in really many years. And I hate to have to tell you that the first time I retrieved it to ever tell it was at his funeral 4 months afterwards. He was packing the trunk of his car to go on a camping trip. Two guys came in from another part of the project, saw him, and must have said to themselves, he'll do. But his homies and his friends kept asking me this question, what's the point of doing good if that can happen to you? And I thought it was a good question. So standing in front of a packed church at the night of his funeral, I said, before he left us, he knew the truth of who he was, that he was exactly what God had in mind when God made him. And so he became that truth. He inhabited that truth. And no bullet, can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's great. There's a vision that undergirds who you are. You want to see people. You want to create spaces where they feel safe. And then you want to cherish them. For tenderness is the highest form of spiritual maturity, and only the spirit and soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing it. Systems change when people do, and people change when they are cherished. And so we choose to create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it and imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, we wait for it. Thank you very much. Exactly. You know, so we're just gonna entertain, not for very much, because it's 8 o'clock already. So just go like this and shout out a question, and David and Ashley and myself will, yes?
I love the name Homeboy. I love the name Homies. How do you come up with that? And how about the ladies? How do they like being in Homeboy?
Okay, so, yeah, Homeboy was just kind of back in the day, it just sort of, it became clear. Keep in mind that in 1988, when this effort began in the projects, women comprised like 5% of the gang population. Now cut to 34 years later, they represent like 3% of the gang population. So having said that, we wouldn't have any women working at Homeboy if we didn't change kind of our own mission statement. So we always talk about formerly gang involved and previously incarcerated people. So in order to work there, and if you're a male, you have to be a gang member. But to be a female to work there, you have to be a felon. So that's how we have, 45%, or 40% maybe are women. So, so we started Homegirl Cafe, which was a kind of a nod to trying to have some kind of balance. But it's not balanced. It's not like 50% are men of gang members and 50% are women. It's not a balanced thing. So it never would have occurred to us. Why, it was somewhere where somebody introduced me and said he's the founder of Homeboy Homegirl Industries. I go, well, no, it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense in 1988. It wouldn't have occurred to anybody to do that because it was a guy thing. Is it still a guy thing? Yeah, pretty much. It just is, at least gangs in Los Angeles. And I should say that we have the Global Homeboy Network, which was started in 2008, I think. And so now we have 300 programs in the country and 50 outside the country that are kind of loosely modeled on our methodology. That's kind of how it works. In the early days, it was gang members, and then it was returning citizens, and then it was homeless mental health population and disaffected youth. So from Sydney to Glasgow to San Diego. And we gather every summer for what we call the gathering, and that's for 3 days in August. So, but if you have any interest in that and coming to the gathering, so we share best practices and talk about what we think we're doing. Yeah, I saw a hand over there somewhere. Oh, we did? Okay, wow. So I'm anticipating your questions. No need to ask them. Yes, go ahead.
To hear Ashley and David reflect on how it was to share tonight.
No, not at all.
I go, it felt good. No, I've never been a speech person, like I said before, but I kind of enjoyed coming here tonight and being able to express to you guys what I've been through, and for you guys listening. It's kind of hard to tell people that you're really close to sometimes, like how you feel or what's going on in your life. It's kind of, especially growing up how we did, but like, oh, you better not say something, or you better not say something, or sometimes you've been through so much with somebody that you kind of really don't want to share. So I just told myself, I'm going to share my story for the first time. I'm going to do it with people that I never, no disrespect or nothing, but with people that I just met, which you guys are a great crowd, and I appreciate that. But I was like, at least, it's in Denver, not in Los Angeles, But if I just felt like maybe it's better to just get it out like that, and and I'm kind of glad I did, and I really appreciate you guys for listening to it. Thank you.
I almost put that in my pocket. I'm not all the way reformed, by the way. No, but I'm honored. I felt honored. I mean, I could just think of where I was, and now I'm speaking in front of a crowd, and being able to contribute back, being able to give back, being able to hopefully have a message that will carry on to someone that someone can learn from, or I just want to be a vessel, for God. And hopefully one day I'll be able to make more of a change in our community, or be more of an asset to Homeboys. I'm taking public speaking, but I don't think it's doing well. Because that watch was almost mine.
How about one last? Yeah.
Brenda?
I'm not exactly sure how to express this, but I have a feeling that at some point in your life, you went from being a giver to just being a part of the whole thing. And what happened that that you crossed over to realizing that we're all one, that there's no difference?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so probably the first 10 years, I was getting perilously close to burnout, and I've learned subsequently, in almost 40 years working with gang members, that, and I would tell my senior staff, they go, I don't know, I think I'm burning out. I guess I am just so compassionate, and I thought, no, with all due respect, you're burning out because you've allowed it to become about you. It can't become about you. It has to be about us. So if you go to the margins to make a difference, then it's about you. But if you go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different, then it's about us. So I was in Houston, and there was a guy there once, a hardcore gang intervention worker, who came up to me after a talk, and he was a really good guy, and he was pleading with me, how do you reach them, meaning gang members? And I found myself saying to him, you know, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? Can you allow your heart to be altered? Can you receive who they are? You know, not to get too biblical here, but you know, in the original covenantal relationship, God says, as I have loved you, so you must have a preferential care and love for the widow, orphan, and the stranger, which is a classic kind of identifying of subsets of the poor, the widow, orphan, and the stranger. And so the thinking is, these are the folks God believes who know what it's like to have been cut off. And because they have suffered in exactly this way, these are the folks who happen to be our trustworthy guides to get the rest of us to the kinship of God. So it turns on its head what we think we're doing. And so volunteers, pre-pandemic, we had 300 volunteers. And they'd all come in and they go, what am I going to do here? And I go, no, wrong question. What's going to happen to you here? That's the question. And then there is no depletion. There's depletion when it's about you, when you're rescuing, saving, and fixing. But when you're not doing that, when it's exquisitely mutual, then it's about us. And it's eternally replenishing. Then you never burn out because you're delighting in the person in front of you and you're anchored in the present moment. I'm just going to end with one last story to kind of put a little button on that. So there was a homie, and it reminds me of It Takes What It Takes. It was a kid named Danny who always refused to, he vowed to me once, I will never step foot in Homeboy Industries. And I knew him in the projects, I knew him in the alleys, I knew him riding his bike with a gun tucked in the front of his pants. And it takes what it takes. And so he finally went to, locked up everywhere. I knew him in juvenile halls and probation camps and such. And then he went to prison just for 2 years. And he got out at 20. And it takes what it takes. And for him, he returned to his home, and his mother had 6 months to live, and she had pancreatic cancer. So he became the principal caregiver, which was remarkable because he had a lot of siblings. But the most remarkable part was he was the caregiver, and she tortured him. And I watched him with great tenderness. And only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. So she died. A week later, I buried her. And then he walked into my office. And so I watched him at the place that these two men described. I watch him work side by side with enemies. I watch him laugh. I watch him inhabit the truth of who he is. He's seen and he's cherished. And he decided to transform his pain so he didn't have to transmit it anymore. So he was only like 5 months in, and he comes into my office and he sits down and he says, what happened to me yesterday has never happened to me in my life. And he proceeds to tell me that after work at 5, he goes to the Chinatown Gold Line stop to go east to his home. And he says, it's a packed train, but I got a seat. And standing right in front of me, hanging onto a pole, was a medio pedo guy. He says, a guy who's a little bit drunk. He's a homie because I can see tattoos on his hand. But I don't know who he is. And Danny says he's wearing a sweatshirt that says Homeboy Industries, jobs, not jails, and it fills his chest. And the little bit drunk guy looks at the shirt and he goes, you work there? And Danny says, I don't know whether I should really answer him, so he nods. is it any good? And Danny says, it's helped me. In fact, I don't think I'm going to go back to prison because of this place. And then Danny stands and he fishes out a piece of paper in his pocket and he has a pen and he carefully writes on the piece of paper the address of Homeboy Industries. And as he's telling me the story, he says, I couldn't believe I knew the address by heart. And he finishes it and he hands it to the guy and he says, you call us, we'll help you. And the guy studies the piece of paper and they see each other. And the guy says, thank you. And the train stops and the guy gets off and Danny sits down. Now he starts to get emotional. He says, what happened next has never happened to me in my life. Everybody on the train was staring at me. Everyone on the train was nodding at me. Everyone on the train was smiling at me. And now he can barely speak. And for the first time in my life, I felt admired. And it becomes a privilege and exquisitely mutual to be reached, not him by me, but to allow your heart to be altered, to receive who people are, and then together you inhabit your mutual dignity and remind each other of your unshakable goodness. Thank you all very much. Grab your water, please.
It'll remind you to put your... Sure, thanks.
So we're good.
I'm so glad you're all here. Can we give one more round of applause and make sure that Ashley and David and Father Greg know how appreciative we are? A couple of other things, folks. I would like to thank Brenda Bealey. Brenda, could you wave? Brenda? It is Brenda's vision and through her work that Father Greg and Ashley and David are here tonight. I'd like to thank Boulder Valley UU Fellowship for generously providing the space. All proceeds are going to Homeboy Industries from tonight. And finally, I'd like to thank each of you for coming and supporting this tonight, and also for your work in the community, helping everybody connect. So good job, everybody. Thank you. And finally, if you have books by Father Greg, he is willing to sign them. He will stay for a few more minutes. The table where you were checking in or where you saw the lady with the name tags, he can sign them there, and but then they'll be on their way. So thank you so much again for coming, everybody.